Have you played Atari on the toilet today? All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
Apple invents the cat.
Gaming's greatest innovations.
It clips the llama's wings.
All this and more coming up on this week's show. Hello, everyone. The gang is back together. We've got Chris joining us today. Good day, Chris.
Hello.
Hello, Chris. It is great for the three of us to be on this. I really miss you being on the show, Chris.
It's been a while. Oh, and Neil.
Well, I was on last week as a guest, so I've kind of eased back into it. What's that T-shirt you're wearing there, Chris? I just got a glimpse of it. Is that a retro T-shirt?
Some piece of tat I picked up in the UK.
That's incredible. It says Cave Dweller. It's a ZX Spectrum style T-shirt.
And my mate Lee bought the wrong one. He bought the Commodore 64 style one, which is the wrong one.
Boo.
So, yeah, it's just this little shop we found in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Available at rmcretro.store. Right, we're back into it.
That's where it was. Nice.
How have our weeks been? Let's start with you, Dave. What have you been up to?
I've not been well. I've been ill. I've been most of the week in bed. I am better now, though. I'm finally over it now. Other than the only thing I've done this week is change all my lights across to smart lights. Other than that, I've done nothing retro related at all. Not
when you're not well. When I'm not well, I think, okay, at least I'll try and play some retro games or something. But usually my eyes can't take it. I just get sore eyes and I just need to sleep. Are you the same? Did you
sleep?
Find
just sleep.
time?
I watched a playthrough of Skyrim, a region lock let's play of Skyrim. That's what I watched.
Okay, Chris, what about you?
I've been doing several retro things. I'm going to do a plea for help, if I may, right? If that's okay. Basically, one of the things I'm working on when I was back in the UK, I did a walk around my hometown with my schoolmate Lee, looking at the locations of where all the computer shops that we used to go to were. And we've put together what we think is quite a nice video. But what I can't find are any period correct photos of those locations. And I've been close to people and then the chat goes silent just when they say, oh yeah, I think I've got some photos and what have you, including, just we've been close. So if anybody has any photos, because obviously you guys have got a bigger viewing audience than myself, if anybody has, it's quite specific, but photos from the late 80s into the 90s of computer shops in Tunbridge Wells or Tunbridge in Kent, I would love to hear from you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the video that I've put together anyway, so that would have actually gone out yesterday. When this goes out. But yeah, either I'll do a follow-up or down the track I would do a director's cut, because I would love to have some actual photos of what these shops used to look like. It'd be fantastic.
I know how frustrating it is, because when I was trying to cover the old Microprose shop in Tetbury over this way, I was determined to find, because I went to visit the location, it's a charity shop now, I was determined to find a photo to hold up to compare it. Luckily, I did find one eventually in a magazine. It had been covered in an article and there was just a tiny photo of it. So I managed to get that much. But I think a great idea, if you're listening, Rob Smith, and not too busy making new songs, on your retro.directory, instead of just places to go, how about historic points of interest? And you could have a layer of photographs and you could show old video game shops on your map. How about that?
That would be brilliant.
Because I'd love to go walk down my old high street and see Dixon's as it used to be and the independent computer shops that I used to go to.
Pictures of you
in the window.
That's exactly the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
Thank you. Yeah. Rob Smith.
Nice. So there we go. That's what I'm working on. Other than that, I also bought a controller for my Amiga. Won't bore you with the details, but essentially it's another way of playing Star Wars. I know
It's not boring. It's not boring. It's not boring.
It's not boring.
Give us the details.
Okay. So it's if you've ever seen a Bishu Zoomer, if you haven't, look it up. In fact, there's one on the shelf behind me. It's now in front of my Batman pack, and it's also on the big screen behind me. In fact, I'll give Duncan a photo. That might be easier for him to slice in. But basically, it's the same joystick that we bought the very same day we bought my first Amiga back in 1989, and my brother bought it specifically originally to play Star Wars with. And it's not a perfect experience because it's digital. It's not analog, obviously, but for the home, for the time, it's not a bad way of getting that arcade experience. So, yeah, Bishu Zuma.
I always saw the Zuma in magazines advertised. I never saw one in person. And I always thought it looked very plasticky. Is it plasticky and creaky, or is it solid?
It is plasticky and creaky and solid at the same time. It's not cheap plastic. Okay. Unfortunately, and this was the demise of my original, where they have a weakness is the way the left and right switch works inside is just one shaft of plastic sticking out, and then the two micro switches on the inside push against that. But this piece of plastic doesn't go all the way through. It doesn't connect on both sides of the inside of the chassis. So if you push too hard, which we were prone to do as kids, that would snap off, and then that would be the end of the device. So yeah, the weakness is inside. The outside, it actually feels quite robust. It's not bad at all. And there were several iterations. There was an analog version and there was an NES version as well, I seem to recall. So yeah.
Nice. Well, if you want to see Chris's review of the Zuma or memories of the Zuma.
Pretty much.
And you have titled it OK Zuma, I hope.
No, I don't. I haven't actually. I've titled it it's not clickbait, but it kind of is. The title of that video is "My Collection is Complete." Kind of.
Okay.
Because for me, it genuinely completes that day one Amiga from back in 1989.
Yeah.
It completes the pack of everything we bought that very first day, which is quite a special milestone when you're collecting memories. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Dave, I talked over you a bit there.
I watched Chris's video on it. That's all right. Everybody's used to you doing that, Neil. I watched Chris's video expecting this to be awful, expecting it not to work, and I'm really impressed with it. It does look like a good Star Wars experience. Obviously, it's not as good as the arcade, but for a 1989 thing, I'm really impressed. There is a question, though, and I did ask Chris this, and he disagreed with me. There is something rattling inside his stick, and he says he doesn't want to open it up. And I've said, well, what if something's loose and you've got a chance to fix it before it completely breaks? I'm worried about it.
Slight correction, it's not rattling. It's not. So when they break, when they snap inside, you hear it rattling. So when I unboxed it, I was surprised that it wasn't rattling. Oh, because also it was advertised on eBay as not working, but it actually works perfectly. But there was a slight, every now and again you hear a slight click as you move it. But it's clearly working. It's 100% working, and there's nothing rattling around inside.
Well, there's nothing rattling. Sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah. There's nothing actually rattling. So I'm hesitant to open it because generally when I open things, they don't work again, even if there was nothing wrong with them in the first place. So I might leave it, and then if the day that it stops working, then I'll open it and see what I've snapped. Yeah.
No, I would have it open. I would have some silicone grease on any plastic that touches plastic. I would be wanting to make sure that if I could do something to make sure it lasted forever, I would do it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Should we get into this week's stories?
No, let's talk more about joysticks.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk more about the retro directory idea, but I mean, Dave, if Rob doesn't implement it, will you cry? You're on mute.
He's on mute. I think the cat just muted him.
Boys, don't cry. Johnny muted me there. Johnny, you're a traitor. You're a traitor, Johnny.
Oh,
you muted
you up
me
perfectly, and Johnny ruined it.
That is brilliant.
You muted me, Johnny. Yeah, Johnny's my cat. If you're an audio listener, Johnny is my cat, and he's a monster. Aren't you, Johnny? You're a monster.
Where's the other one? Did it get eaten by Johnny?
No, Dot is climbing and breaking things as we speak, I'm sure.
Cool. When I got my hands on my first smartphone and later my first tablet, the first thing I did was see what games I could download for them. This was before I'd even remotely considered myself into retro gaming, or even before those words meant anything to me at all. It was just gaming to me, and the games I tried to find for my brand new modern, at the time, devices were rather telling, because I searched for games like Space Invaders, Spy Hunter, Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, Carmageddon, and even Sphinx Adventure. You get the point. All I wanted to do on my new touchscreen device was play games, and the games that I liked. And it's just that those games happened to be old. I was surprised to see that games like Spy Hunter were not easy to find, but very excited to see full ports of Duke Nukem 3D and even Carmageddon. Disclaimer, this was on Android devices whose App Store at the time felt like a bit of a dark alley in the wrong side of town, but it had the stuff that I wanted, so I really didn't care.
Can you remember Carmageddon in particular? What stands out for me with that was seeing, it was amazing to see it on an Android, but boy, did my phone get hot, and you could just watch the battery life go down, 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 down. Was that your experience?
Battery life, yes. I don't recall the device getting hot, but I recall what I played that on was the tablet. So that was an Asus Transformer TF101 or whatever it was. Yeah. So that's probably why it didn't get hot. But yeah, battery life, any gaming, yeah, certainly sucked it. Full screen, touching the touch-sensitive screen all the time, it's going to drain it. Apple, in comparison, obviously going back to the app stores, they've been very strict about what apps they can and can't be listed on their store. And that's kind of hindered retro game ports and emulators as well. However, recent changes have opened up the gates, and finally Apple fanboys can also join in on the fun that Android owners have had from day one. So Lord Borak 316 has made us aware of a story on Time Extension about the latest emulator to become available for iOS. And it's actually a shame that Reese isn't here to cover this story, because it's kind of an Atari one. Because close to completion.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yes, sorry, I'm back. Reese, Dave, can you get hold of Reese? He can take over the rest of the story.
There's always Reese Rambles. If you want some more Reese, go and look for Reese Rambles.
I'm sure Reese will let everybody know once this comes out, actually, what he thinks
of it.
Because, what is it? Well, Close to Completion is an emulator for the Atari Jaguar. Yes, if you own an iPhone, then hopefully by next month, you too can experience the worst gaming library to ever carry the Atari logo, all in the palm of your hand. The emulator is being developed by Rich Whitehouse, who, according to the story, is not only a Jaguar fan, but he's also head of digital conservation for the Video Game History Foundation. In the story, you can see a tweet from Rich, which includes a screenshot of playing Tempest 2000, a rehash of a 70s game, tellingly still touted as the Jaguar's best game ever. If you click through to the actual tweet, in fact, you see more of the screenshot, and you can see the game, and below it a rendered D-pad on the left and the CBA buttons going from middle to right. And then below that, you've got the telephone pad, because obviously the Jaguar controller had this insane number of buttons down at the bottom. And actually, it looks quite nice the way he's done it. To avoid turning this story into nothing but me bashing the Jaguar again, what I'm actually interested in, guys, is what games did you first play on your smartphones or your tablets? And did you find it a comfortable experience? Where does mobile gaming fit for you guys?
You mentioned the Video Game History Foundation. Go and have a look at the website, anyone who hasn't already, because I love the mission that they're trying to achieve. It's very much in tune with longer term goals that I have for the cave, but they are already there and much more professional and much more organized. And they've got a brilliant library, which is to encourage the research of video games. You know, people come in who properly want to dig through magazines and research and things like that. It looks brilliant. And I'd love to get the cave to do something even close to what they're doing over in America. So it looks great. Now, on mobile gaming, I did actually have a hand-me-down Apple Newton. It was already old by the time that I got it, but that was probably my first tablet or Palm Top at the time. And I don't remember any built-in games on it. I had to look it up, and apparently there were about 20 games available for it, but if there was, it wouldn't have been anything more than a Minesweeper or something like that. What I really remember was when I got a compact iPack and I started running the Game Boy emulators on it, because it was a black and white device. So it worked great with the monochrome Game Boy games, but it still wasn't perfect because it didn't have a decent D-pad. It just felt a bit weird, but it was fun to do. When I got an Android, I remember the first thing I tried to do with it was Exalt, the Ultima. Yes, got an Ultima mention in there. Emulator. Again, I was impressed with how it ran, but it's a bit odd trying to run a full-blown PC game on a tiny phone with no keyboard. So it was more sort of a tech demo for me. And mobile gaming never really clicked for me on tablets and phones, unless it's a Game Boy or something like this, which I love. This is my little Miu Mini. Little device with a really great quality screen, good battery life, and it's just Linux based. It just runs a load of emulators. It's got enough buttons, 4 on the front, 4 shoulder buttons on the back. So enough buttons to do pretty much everything you want. So that is my favorite way of mobile gaming at the moment, the Miyoo Mini with a little carry case. Jaguar, you're right. It's a terrible games library. I've got a multi-cart in the cave, so I can explore all of the games, and I've tried to explore all the games. Obviously, Alien v Predator, I can enjoy that. Rayman's a good example. But my favorite game is probably Power Drive, which is a little 2D isometric rally game. It's not 3D. And just like a lot of the games I enjoy on the Jaguar, like NBA Jam, it's not exclusive to the system. So what's the point of having a Jaguar to play it? Yes, it's a very good home version. It would have been very good at the time, but we were all wanting 3D. We were wanting to see what kind of power this Jaguar had, and it's not really tapping into any of that side of things. And we were also going into the CD multimedia generation, and, you know, that was an extra add-on again for the Jag to get CDs. So yeah, I haven't got many great things to say other than there's a few nice 2D games on the system.
Fair enough.
And I'm not going to rush out to get it for my iPhone.
No. Yeah. Dave, what's your take on it?
Well, I think the first mobile game that I played was Angry Birds. And I enjoyed Angry Birds as a casual game up to the point where the penny dropped for me and I realised there actually isn't any skill in this. It's obvious what you need to do in each one, and you just need to repeat it until it works. And I think they had coins you could buy special stuff with, and that was the whole point of the game. By that point, was give us your money to get to pass these levels. I moved on to another game I think called Bubble Witch, and it was a bit like Puzzle Bobble. But eventually, I got to the point where I realised that it was either down to luck and you just repeating the same thing with no more skill. You weren't trying to do something different, and or pay to win. You having to buy these coins, which I never did, thankfully. I just wanted a nice, simple, easy game to sit down when I had a bit of spare time, and that would be when I'm waiting for something, or even just on the bog. And I gave up entirely on mobile gaming until I got this little thing. So, like Neil's Miyoo Mini, this is my Powkiddy RGB30, a nice little device, does lots of stuff, and it's great. It's a handheld, it wasn't too expensive, and it's powerful enough to emulate anything I've asked it to do. So it's a great little thing for playing just a simple fight and go right game on the bog if I need to. But I do want a new Jaguar. I want Atari to give us a Jaguar and release a few carts and multi-carts for it, and let us have the full Jaguar library in the space of maybe 3 or 4 different carts, like the way that Evercade do with their curated collections. Can they curate one cart with a few on it, another cart with a few more, and give us everything worthwhile on it? But I think that the reality is it's probably very difficult to license each of the games on it. Never mind put so many on a cart that might actually work easily for them. So I'm not certain how possible it is. But yeah, the Atari Jaguar, as we've said before, is such a waste of potential in a machine. It was such a powerful machine that didn't go the way it should have gone, because of the way that Atari launched it, they didn't give the developers the support that was needed.
Yeah, I agree. I still try to love it. It's interesting that Neil mentioned actually AVP, because I've got that again now. That was one of my favourite games on the system, and I really want to love it again, but actually revisiting that has not been a pleasant experience.
It's the wrong version of AVP. The best one's a Capcom one.
Oh, the beat 'em up, the side-scrolling beat 'em up.
Completely different game.
I used to pile so many coins in that, I tell you. Anyway, but going back to mobile gaming, for me, while gaming on a smartphone or tablet was fun to mess about with, I never found it comfortable. I don't like touchscreen controls at all. Where it could make sense to me, maybe, is in emulating other handhelds like the Game Boy, the Game Gear, or the Lynx. There'd be quite a good fit in my eyes for that, but I wouldn't go much further than that, because I mean there's a PSP emulator for iOS now that's been done, but again, where are the buttons? The PSP's got a lot of buttons, and they're all going to be on the touchscreen. So I don't like that.
Plug a Jaguar joypad in.
Yeah,
then you've got all the buttons.
And you're kind of missing the point of holding one device in your hand, right? So, anyway, but as always, it's just cool that someone actually is putting the time in to create something like this Jaguar emulator for iOS. And given the stupid price of Jaguar games, emulation is the best option for that system. Someone out there will like having the ability to play Cybermorph while on the toilet and possibly flushing it down the bowl when they've finished.
And you can still use the Jag as a toilet seat lid.
We are sponsored today by PCBWay. PCBWay, thank you very much for sponsoring us. What do PCBWay do? Can anyone tell me?
They manufacture PCBs.
Yeah.
Is that all?
Way?
No, they do CNC, 3D printing, PCB assembly, electronic design. They've even got a section on their website which says, why us? And if you click it, they will tell you.
PCBWay have this great shared projects thing, which I always tell people about. It's a fantastic thing to browse through and pick a little project for you to do. PCBWay, thank you for sponsoring us. The website is PCBWay.com. They can do your PCBs. They can assemble them. They can put the little birdseed parts on it for you. Thank you very much.
And I'm picking a project out of the shared projects today on PCBWay.com. It's a capacitor discharger. Look that up. And you can add it to your cart and any other retro-inspired projects in the shared project section of PCBWay.com. The story I've picked this week is a reader's feature in the publication Metro, and it was submitted by Dr. Local over on our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, if you'd like to see all of the stories submitted or contribute to the show. Now, this story was titled The 10 Greatest Innovations in Video Games According to Me. Not me, but me, the author. And I did start off by checking the comments on this story on Metro, and it was filled with comments such as, bless you, son, a feature not moaning about Sony. Wow, some positivity. And more complaining, please. So I guess Retro readers features perhaps have a bit of a glass half full approach normally, and people were refreshed by how positive this article was. It's a subjective list of 10 innovations that shaped this writer's life in gaming. And I think perhaps when we've critiqued his, we can maybe bring some of our own to the table, because it's one thing to be critical of someone else. It's another to actually put forward our own ideas. So we'll do that too. Now, let's go through the list then. He starts off with, and this is, remember, a list of the greatest gaming innovations of all time, shoulder buttons on a SNES joypad. Now, this sounds basic. Dave, I can see Dave already getting irritated. I don't mind this one because at the time that the Super Nintendo was current, I had a home computer. It supported one, sometimes two buttons in a game. Yes, Dave, you're already asking to speak. Go ahead, Dave.
When I first saw this, I'm not sure it said according to me. I feel like they've added according to me after they published the article, and they've changed the headline, and it changes everything about it. It changes from the 10 greatest innovations in video games. This article's terrible, but from the 10 greatest innovations in video games, according to me, it's fine.
Do you feel disarmed, Dave? Did he disarm you with those words?
Yes.
Well,
not disarmed, just shouldered.
Let's get back to the shoulder buttons on the SNES pad. So I was using an Amiga, an Amstrad before that. One button, sometimes two button support on my Amiga games. And then when I went to my friend's house who had a SNES, and especially when Street Fighter 2 appeared, this pad had a whopping 6 buttons, and I thought that was cool. Chris, go ahead.
This is where I have to jump in, because everybody says the Amiga had one button, and it didn't. You had an entire keyboard, and that model stands today for PC gamers, right? Mouse, keyboard. It's more than a console. Carry on.
True, but there's a big difference between playing Street Fighter 2 on a keyboard and Street Fighter 2 on a joypad.
That I'll agree.
Okay. But was it innovative to have 6 buttons on a SNES joypad? Well, I would argue not, because arcades already had 6 buttons. Street Fighter 2 itself had 6 buttons. I guess deciding to put them on the shoulders of the joypad was a nice idea, but nice, but I wouldn't call this one innovative. The next one is Rumble. Now, the writer clearly had an N64 and Star Fox.
Are you ready to rumble?
Let's get ready to rumble. And their first experience of force feedback then, if they're saying it was Star Fox, would have been 1993.
Would it though? Star Fox. So the original Star Fox was on the SNES.
Oh, hang on, yeah,
and that didn't have
SNES.
Rumble. Yeah. So I think he's referring to because I think he said Lilac Wars. So that would have been Star Fox 64. So 1997, I think.
97. So that was his first experience, or what he feels like was the innovative experience of feedback in a game. 1997. Now I agree. Force feedback or rumble feedback was a great innovation for gaming, and bringing it to consoles with a simple device that just slots into the joypad. So on the N64, you'd buy the rumble pack, you'd slot it in, you were locked and loaded, and away you went. That was neat. But it already existed, of course. I mean, Outrun is the first one that springs to mind. You've got rumble on your steering wheel. And that takes us all the way back to whenever Outrun came out, 86.
I'm sure Outrun wouldn't have been the first.
No, I'm sure it wouldn't have been the first. There would have been, some before that. And you think about things like Operation Wolf, where you've got a very mechanical feedback from the clunk of the gun and things like that. There's lots out there.
Cuba, would you count that?
With the solenoid. I agree. Rumble or feedback, physical feedback, mechanical feedback is innovative. I would have just cited a much earlier example. Next one on the list, analog sticks. Super Mario 64 is the context given. This is very N64 centric, but analog sticks go way back. I mean, I remember trying out Revs on a BBC Micro with an analog stick, and it just felt incredible. Anyone who's played flight sims, Chris, lusted after an analog stick or his Zuma yoke. Is that Zuma yoke analog or
no? That's digital. So on the Amiga, I had the Voltmace Delta, which is like one of those cheap analog sticks that's like
Voltmace Delta.
It's like a toothpick in a yogurt tub, but it was analog and it was the only one I could afford. But you needed it for flight sims.
I know that the Apple II joysticks were those kind of, and the BBC ones, were those analog joysticks that were just rubbish. They were like, did you see a toothpick and a yogurt? Yeah, they were blah 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 blah, and they were maybe good for flight sims, but trying to play Lord Runner on that was rotten.
When you imagine a BBC Micro joystick that you've just described, you're probably imagining the Voltmace Delta. It's that kind of shape. And actually, with home micros, analog was kind of the norm in the very early days, and it was like the Atari 2600 with its iconic digital stick and the console side of things, and then home computers followed suit. So yeah, I mean, the N64's analog stick became standard in 1996 with the console's launch in Japan. Sony first demonstrated their dual analog controller for the PlayStation in November of 96. It would be released in 97. And companies like Namco had, they'd released their twisting, is it the Niji or Con or whatever it's called, the twisty thing that you'd play with Ridge Racer and other games. That came out in 95 for the PlayStation. The Rubik's Cube, yeah, but that was a third-party device and still better than an Atari Jaguar controller. Nintendo made it the standard. Okay, innovative, but not the first. And as we've mentioned N64 a lot, I'll just pause for breath and let Chris mention his favorite N64 game.
Oh, it has to be GoldenEye.
There it is.
But when it isn't, it's Beetle Adventure Racing.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, next one is a bit odd on the list. Frame rate. I mean, what game doesn't have frame rate?
Sorry.
What does he mean by this? Well, in the article, he says he's talking about 30 versus 60 frames per second being an innovation. And I would say, try 3 frames per second. I think frame rates managing to increase with complex gaming or 3D worlds and complex graphics, it just goes hand in hand with the hardware advances, which are mostly iterative. So I wouldn't really chalk frame rate up as innovative in itself. It was almost inevitable, really. We all wanted it, and the hardware worked towards achieving that. Yeah. Anyone got anything to add to frame rate as an innovation?
No.
I mean, even a text adventure has a blinking cursor. It's got a frame rate.
I think what he's trying to say, he's trying to say that there was a drive to deliver a higher frame rate, a kind of a, no, this is not acceptable, we need to get more frames per second. And sure there was, but that was only when the technology allowed it to happen. I mean, we struggled by with 12 frames a second in Doom in the mid-90s, because that's all we had. It was that either that or nothing. We go back now and it's not enough. 12 frames per second is not enough for Doom now. We want smooth 60 frames a second for it to be enjoyable. But who invented
Who invented frame?
It's an innovation. It's an innovation.
No.
Oh dear.
I really struggle with that. I get what he's trying to say, though. He's trying to say the
smooth gaming.
There's a difference.
Smooth gaming. Yeah, I think that's where we're going with that. Next one, interesting off the back of Chris's story: touchscreen.
In the bin.
Self-explanatory.
Yeah. In the bin.
Innovative.
No.
Windows 8 certainly thought so.
He's put Windows Vista as one of his innovations in gaming.
Well, he did actually. The example in this was the Nintendo DS. Okay, and I get that. I had a little stylus, and you could poke, and the games, as it was standard, the games would make use of it. But large screen gaming experiences, no, I don't want to touch my PC screen on a big screen with a console. I don't want to be walking that close to a big screen to have to touch it. Some of the modern consoles have got touch interfaces on the joypads themselves, which are interesting innovations. I quite like what they're doing with those. But touchscreen, I don't see it as innovative in gaming. I see it just as a different input method, really. Just as a different way of interacting. VR. Innovative. Yes. Come on. You can't say VR isn't innovative.
It's not VR I'm laughing at. It's the next one after this.
Okay. Yeah. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. VR. Sorry, I shouldn't jump ahead. But
no.
We'll get to that. Okay.
VR.
So VR. Innovative, yes. Refined, not as much as I'd like it to be. Did you see the new Facebook glasses that were announced this week with Zuck showing them off? No. Didn't they look like very much like normal glasses, albeit quite chunky, but they did just look like a normal pair of glasses. They look like Buddy Holly glasses, right? Wireless, completely wireless.
Buddy Holly's glasses were wireless.
They were.
That's true. So wireless glasses are an innovation.
Right. So think of glasses, guys. Think of glasses, but wireless.
Sounds like an Apple launch. Sounds like an Apple launch.
Hold it together.
So I think with innovations like that, we are edging closer to VR. And what I see as the perfect pair of VR glasses is like those Oakley glasses that were very popular in the 90s, the wraparound Oakley glasses.
Yes. Yeah.
As simple as that, wireless, lightweight, you're in VR, bang, you take them off, you put them on, nice and easy. Innovative. It was innovative in 1990 with virtuality. It's enjoyable now. It will be for perfect soon. I don't think there can be too many arguments with that. Right, we're on to the next one. Dave's favorite. One of the top innovations in all time in the history of gaming. Good games. I think we're running out of ideas now. Good games. He then lists a bunch of games that he thinks are good games. And that's it.
Because he didn't try. Until that certain point, they didn't try to make good games. Shall we make this good?
That's right.
No, let's not bother.
No, it wasn't in their thinking, really.
Imagine it. The innovation. Hang on. Wait, stop everyone. Why don't we make a good game?
What was his list of good games? Was it Tempest? Was it?
I didn't even. Zelda was in there.
Zelda. Oh,
yeah.
right,
Zelda.
Okay.
He's a bit of a Nintendo fanboy, isn't he? This guy, clearly.
And then the next two I'm just going to skip over quickly because they take us back to joypads again. So there was the start button, and in particular, he likes the. Let me finish. He likes the nostalgia.
We had to stare at the screen as it went through the attract loop, and we couldn't press start until someone invented the start button.
I didn't start a game until 2002 because there was no start button. I was waiting for one.
This is an uphill battle. He liked seeing press start to begin on the screen. Press start. He liked that. He's getting a bit nostalgic in this one.
Has he tried putting a coin in a coin-op machine?
And then in the next one, trigger buttons. So again, joypads, adding triggers to joypads.
I agree with that.
Hand in hand with shoulder buttons.
I actually agree with trigger buttons. Yeah,
trigger button?
Well, the tactile. One of the selling points for the original Xbox for me was the fact that the trigger buttons were analog and they were so responsive. And playing a driving game it reminded me of using a Scalextric controller and having that control of the speed in a very nice way. So I'm with trigger buttons. I like it.
Are they analog? Are they?
Yeah.
And then 64 had the Z trigger button underneath.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, this could have been it should have whittled this down to the top 10 N64 innovations, maybe, or innovations or something. And then the list is rounded off with the 10th item, which is the social aspect of gaming. And the author says... Well, the author says that gaming is a niche hobby, but the Wii effect tore that down. Yes, thank you to the Nintendo Wii, gaming became social. Surely, I think that's more of a reference to casual gaming or online gaming becoming the norm, because social games, they go back to LAN parties, they go back to couch co-op, they go back to arcade machines themselves and arcades as a venue. I don't think you can attribute social gaming to the Wii, but I get it. I think he means more casual gaming, getting members of the family involved in gaming that otherwise wouldn't have been interested, perhaps, with the Wii.
Put the strap round your wrist, Granny. No, put the strap round your wrist. Otherwise, you'll send it into the telly.
Too late.
That concludes the list. Dare I ask, Dave, what are your thoughts and what 3 innovations do you want to bring to the table?
I don't want to bash the guy anymore. It's been fun talking about it, and he did say the things according to him. So that's personal. My list, the 3 things. Number 1 is saved games. Saved games allowed games to be deeper. It allowed us to go more beyond the arcade style game, which you played, you were over in 5 minutes, or if you're really good, 15. Save games allowed us to play Dungeon Master and save and come back later. Allowed us to play The Bard's Tale. Text adventures with save games. Save games are amazing. Number 2 is hard disks. The difference when you add hard disks to games as the baseline for them is incredible. Point-and-click adventures when you have a hard disk are fantastic. You have games that have intros. You have games that have all sorts of multimedia in them when you have a hard disk added. Fantastic. And the last one, just because it's me and I thought I'd try not to pick things that you guys might pick, is the manual. And I'll extend that to cover non-physical manuals, including Wikipedia's specific to the game. That extra bit of world creation, because for me, games are about world creation. The old Origins slogan, we created worlds. That kind of exploration of worlds is helped immensely by manuals.
And actually, your 3 innovations complement each other really well. A hard disk can give you a bigger world. Saved games let you come back to it. The manual lets you take it away with you and, continue your adventure. So I like that.
That's true.
A question for you two, though. Of his 10, which do you think belong? Now, not necessarily in your own top 10, but if we were making candidates for a list for top 10 and we had a short list to go on there, which of his would go on there?
From his list, I would choose VR, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Chris?
I agree with VR, but because Neil's picked it, I will go back to trigger buttons. I like them. And despite what I said earlier, the gamepad concept rather than the joystick and having all those buttons at your fingertips literally is a good innovation for control. Yeah.
And your 3 innovations and your thoughts on the story in general, Chris?
I've kind of gone a bit more recent in terms of gaming history, but GPUs, especially 3DFX era, I mean, that changed gaming, certainly changed my gaming life. But even before that, when you had custom chips that were specifically given the task of looking after the graphics, that was a big leap at the time for those systems as well. Dave said hard drive, so I'm going to push it into the very recent time, SSDs. They've really changed things in terms of boot up times and also reducing load times. and wireless. We joked about wireless glasses because, of course, they are. But when you start messing about with things like VR, even if you've still got controllers, if you're playing with a system like the Quest 2 or 3, where there's no cables whatsoever unless you're charging the things, that is literally a game changer, no pun intended once again, to just be able to do that completely, without being encumbered by wires here, there, and everywhere. So, yeah, things going wireless. Doesn't matter if it's the networking, the controllers, headphones. Get rid of the wires, and that changes everything.
Awesome. Right. So if I do 3, we'll have 9, and we'll throw in his VR to get our list of 10. So I'm going to go with the home computer. Why is that innovative? Because you're no longer playing games on mainframes. So that's going way back. I'm going to go with the arcade. Actually having a game in a dedicated arcade from computer to space, whether you think that's the most innovative pioneer or Pong because of its popularity, the arcade game. And I'm going to go with the light gun. I'm going to go with the light gun. I really like the light gun as an input method, and I wish there were more games that supported light guns. I love light guns.
More on that later.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay. So saved games, hard disks, manuals, GPUs, SSDs, wireless stuff, home computers, arcades, and light guns and VR. That's our list of 10. That was easier than expected. I think, should we submit a reader's article to Metro, see if we can get it in there, see if anyone then submits it to This Week in Retro, and then we can critique our own work in the same way?
Yeah.
Let's do
that.
Brilliant.
Idiots.
Brilliant.
I want to welcome 2 new patrons. I want to welcome John and Eelco. So thank you very much for signing up to be patrons. We do appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
And also get well soon, John, because I did see on Twitter.
John has... Yeah. Hopefully by the time you hear this, John, you are better. Yeah. And some terrible news about our friend Clint. Clint's been on the show. Lovely guy. He's as nice as he appears to be in these videos, LGR. He lives in Asheville in North Carolina in the United States of America, which is has been hit by the elements and it was underwater when I saw it in the news. Huge amounts of damage there. Many people have died. It's a terrible situation there. Unfortunately, Clint appears to have lost his house to it. And he's asked for this message to be shared everywhere on the socials. We'll put it here. Hey all, I'm safe, but things are really rough in Asheville. Almost zero phone service across western NCs in North Carolina. Cellular landline, no power, no internet, no running water in my area. Countless homes around me are wrecked like mine. Fully open to the elements with the roof walls gone and too much damage to safely cover up ourselves. I'm staying safe with family for now, but have very little chance to communicate or even think about beginning repairs. Priority now is to cut a path through the dozens of downed trees and create a path to my house, so eventually the trees can be removed from it by crane. Determined to get through this though. And there was a further update from him, and he says, 2 trees destroyed my roof, living and dining room, flooded my LGR collection rooms down below. 12 or more trees down in the front yard. No way yet to get equipment in to remove trees. The roof hole is too big and unstable to put a tarp over it. It is tragic what's happened to Clint. Clint, I know you watch this or listen to this show. We're really sorry this has happened. We're here for you, and you will get back on your feet. You will recover from this.
Yeah. Sending all the best to you, Clint. Your first reaction is, I hope he's safe. It was, great to see that he's safe and well and his family is safe and well and all looking after each other. But the kicker was then to see, and my collection room is flooded as well. I know it's insignificant in the context of his safety and everything, but then you just got to feel for the guy when you hear that bit as well.
Yeah,
so I'm
this
sure
is his livelihood.
Yeah, it is, and his passion as well. Not just his livelihood; it's his hobby and his passion. And I'm sure the community will rally around. Duncan will put any links in that have subsequently come out that can help Clint. So do please check them out and help a fellow retro pioneer.
I would suggest if anyone wants to help, then why not go on an LGR watchathon? Clint has hours and hours and hours of amazing videos. Why not go back and watch him build his megaluminium monster, or when he first put that wood grain vinyl on a PC. Watch him do that again. It's years since you've seen it. You'll enjoy watching it again. Help him out that way. But Clint, we're here for you. Anything needs to happen, it'll happen. But yeah, you'll get back. There is no show next week. Duncan is on holiday, so we will not be with you next week, I'm afraid. You'll have to do without us, but maybe next week you can just watch more LGR. We will with you, though. Neil is back now for the week after next. Chris, would you like to come back in the show full time?
He's going to ask me
no pressure.
Live during
no pressure. No, Chris has said no so many times. It's not. I'm not honestly asking him there. He knows the door's open, but he's already said no. So I won't put him under pressure to answer that.
Just put me on the spot.
I would like to just throw in there. Just thank you, Dave and Reese and everyone else who stepped in and not. It's to say you've covered the show is the wrong word. Driven and run the show and made brilliant episodes, which I've enjoyed as a listener. So thank you, Dave, for keeping things going.
We are still under 10,000 subs on YouTube, and we wanted to get there this year. So, subscribe to us on YouTube. Tell other people to subscribe to us on YouTube. Make other people do it.
Let me get you a live count. 9,550. So we need 450 more.
So close.
Come on. Give it a push.
10,000.
Yeah, let's get there.
From Antiques for Geeks, sadly, Chris Cyril has passed away. He was most known in the UK for That's Life, a consumer programme, but he did many programmes on television on the 80s and 90s. And for most of us in the UK in this hobby, we'll remember him as one of the hosts on the computer programme, an extremely good and important TV programme in the early days of home computing. So sadly, Chris has passed away.
42 Nobody 42 has posted on our subreddit a story about Linux has now been adapted to run on a 4004 Intel, which is a very, very old CPU, and it took just under 5 days to boot up. Impressive nonetheless that it can actually boot up.
Savage Tech has given us a link to a video about CFAX's 50th birthday, so that should be worth a watch. I've added it to my watch later list.
Time Crisis is coming to modern TV thanks to a plug-and-play AI-powered light gun. So 42 Nobody 42 links us to a Time Extension article. It does mention the Sinden light gun, but says that this doesn't need the changes that needs. So I don't know how this actually works, and the article doesn't say how it works.
Oh, it does. It does, Dave. It says right there. It's AI-powered.
AI-powered. There we go. There we go. AI. Or cloud. Or crypto. I think it will know what's on the screen, so it's going to do. I mean, the light guns were so simple back in CRTs, and the Sinden light gun is simple as well because of the border. This, I think, is going to see the entire image of what's on your screen, so that when you point at it, it knows exactly what you're pointing at there. An enormous amount of bandwidth needed to do this, but if it works, and it works well, then it'll be great.
Can you take that light gun on a flight from Heathrow Airport? I'm asking for a friend. Senior Buy 445 links us to a video about the amazing 555 timer, a common IC in many computers. It's worth clicking on, even if you only watch the first few seconds, and believe me, you will.
Squelch411 links us to a time extension review of the Mr. Pi. That's Taki Udon's low-cost alternative to the Intel D10 Nano. And everything seems to be positive that I've been reading about it so far. So I'm sure this will be another good review of it.
Lord Borak links us to a time extension article which explains that a new Californian law will prohibit using the words buy or purchase or any other term that a reasonable person would understand to confer unrestricted ownership on digital stores where you don't get the file to use forever. So Good Old Games would be able to say buy or purchase because that's what you get. You can download it and then it's yours forever, but most other things you wouldn't. Now, I think this is progress. I would prefer a law that said if you buy something, you own it. But instead, this might get people thinking, what are they doing with their money, and realizing that, hang on, I'm not buying this. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. I wonder, though, if they'll get around it with clever wording and just not saying certain things and people won't really notice. Thank you, Johnny, for rubbing against the microphone there.
CS Marauder has linked us to a wonderful video showing the famous PC demo Second Reality running side by side with a new Commodore 64 version. So that is incredibly impressive work. The link to the video and lots more are all in the show notes. And of course, our subreddit, reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro. Don't wait for our shows to come out. Just go and browse the subreddit, click on the stories, explore all of the best retro news that there is to enjoy, and then come back for the show when we summarize it either in briefs or as our chosen stories. And do submit your own stories too. Thank you very much.
Winamp, at least to me, brings back really strong positive memories. It was a symbol of freedom for me. I grew up buying cassette tapes and CDs, and you had to buy a full album or buy a fairly expensive single. And if you wanted to keep up with new music, you had to listen to the radio and endure them playing the same 10 or 15 songs that they were pushing at the time in the hopes of also hearing something new. So to me, Winamp represents not just a way of playing MP3s, it represents the sudden smashing down of the walls and the breaking of the chains that the internet brought to me with music. I could listen to literally anything I wanted, finding it was easy and quick, and it was actually free because I never paid for it, I just pirated it. But Winamp itself was a fairly simple thing, but complex enough for the purpose. For those of you who don't know, Winamp was just an MP3 player for Windows. It played MP3s to start off with and then started playing playlists and eventually internet radio and streams, etc. And it also did visualizations, maybe just a simple wave or some really funky stuff. Milk Drop, I think it was called. But for most of us, and I think for the three of us here, I think what we saw when we were listening to MP3s was Winamp on our computers and has branded itself into our brain that way. It did, of course, mostly fall out of fashion with people. I myself moved on to Fubar 2000, and when paid streaming, I say paid, but when you look at what artists get, well, let's say it's more than what they got from pirate MP3s, so it does count as being paid. Emule and Kazaa and all the rest of it, then I think most of us stopped using Winamp. But I think there's increasing nostalgia for Winamp, not just because of the warm memories that we have of that time in our lives, but also because of digital intrusion and how Winamp could potentially be a simpler way of playing files that we have locally instead of having to log into an app that wants us to do something else all the time. It's trying to push us to do something else or advertise to us. So we covered Winamp fairly recently, and one of the things that we said was that Winamp was going to be open source, and we were happy with that. We thought, fantastic, this might reinvigorate the old thing. And it's true and not true, and that depends what you think open source actually means. If you're like me and you're wrong, then you thought it just meant you could read the source code, but that's not right. According to Wikipedia, open source is source code that is made freely available for possible modification and redistribution. And on the GitHub, which is where the Winamp source is stored, Winamp say, No distribution of modified versions. You may not distribute modified versions of the software, whether in source or binary form. No forking. You may not create, maintain, or distribute a forked version of the software. Official distribution. Only the maintainers of the official repository are allowed to distribute the software and its modifications. That's not open source. It doesn't meet the definition of open source. It's not being open sourced. And a comment from our subreddit from the Nerdy sums it up just right for me. They want the community to do the work that they said they were going to do, then they take advantage of it and profit from it. It's source available. I think that's the correct definition for this.
Source
not
visible?
A common
Source visible. It's like the source is the ketchup, but the recipe is still the recipe is not a secret, but you're not allowed to sell it to the supermarkets. Yeah. There we go.
Obviously, source available is better for end users than nothing for lots of things, but you can see what it does and see there's nothing sinister in it. But I think this is a cynical attempt to get people to work for free on their software.
Just to build on my amazing analogy, you can't even give the ketchup away for free.
Yeah, true.
Not allowed to.
I'm not sure it's a good analogy.
It's not, is it? I think
I want some ketchup.
Duncan will make it sound good.
I'm getting hungry.
And then I got thinking, hang on, what was Winamp originally? It was a tool that we used to play our downloaded MP3s, and it was pretty much unstoppable that people were downloading MP3s. They couldn't find a way to put the lid back on that ketchup bottle, to use an analogy. What are Winamp going to do if people do fork this, and if they do work on it and distribute it? I think there's a poetic justice here. Winamp, which used to be a tool for playing pirated MP3s, is now going to get effectively pirated. But what do you think, folks? Should people help Winamp on their GitHub?
I don't think that we can continue this discussion without at least having Duncan drop in that famous MP3 that came with Winamp when you installed it about the llama. So, Duncan, let's all enjoy it.
Winamp. It really whips the llama's ass.
I think your summary is right, Dave. What are they going to do with it is the question. It's an MP3 player. At a stretch, it's an internet radio player, if that's still a thing, but that is something I used to use it for back in the day. If it tries to be anything else, then it's not really Winamp anymore. It's something completely different. It is the simplicity that made it what it was. And also the wow factor of those visualizations, particularly ones that pushed hardware acceleration. So Milkdrop, you mentioned, that was one that was used DirectX, and it really pushed the hardware. I think there were a few Glide ones perhaps as well when I had my 3DFX card.
There was loads.
Remember? Yeah. Dancing Coke cans, the Dancing Baby, all the rest of them.
No, in the bin.
Oh, that should be on our list of innovations, surely.
The Dancing Baby.
The Dancing Baby.
Made it to Ally McBeal.
Yeah. But you would watch these visualizations and you would imagine them being projected onto a huge wall in a club, and you'd be like, this is the cutting edge of how to enjoy music. This is amazing. And I think in the modern day, VLC is kind of my Winamp, but for videos. It does what it does. It doesn't try to be fancy. It hasn't changed a lot over the years on the surface, and it just gets it done. And Winamp has to stay like that, really. Another problem for Winamp now is that it was really made for MP3s. I know it supports other formats. You can play MIDI files, I think, through Winamp. You certainly can through VLC.
Not mid.
Yeah. So let's just think about that. Winamp came out to help us play MP3s. It's a bit like vinyl records now, the MP3. Winamp came out in 1997, 27 years ago. 1997. In 1997, 27 years ago was 1970. So let that sink in. When Winamp came out, it's a bit like now. Back then, it would have been 1970.
Wow.
So talking about playing our MP3s on Winamp today is like someone telling us in 1997 they used to play In the Summertime by Mungo Jerry on their vinyl record player in the 1970s.
What does that sound like, that song?
Who's going to sing?
Oh, I know the one. No, I'm not singing. Yeah.
In the summertime. That one.
Thank you, Mungo.
Neil's had too much time off.
So you could still enjoy Mungo Jerry today on a vinyl record, or me singing it, just like you have done there. But you've got streaming services. You've got universal availability of online music. You don't really need it. Winamp, I don't know if it's realized this or not, it's not actually cool anymore. It's Mungo Jerry.
Oh, can't top that feedback, I tell you that. Interesting. I mean, well, it's not interesting. It's not really that interesting. It's not something I have nostalgia for, to be honest. Winamp, like I used it.
Does not give you that. No, when you see Winamp, don't give you that. Take you right back. No.
Some things do, other things don't. No apologies. Okay. Staring at a Banshee 3DFX card, nostalgia. Using Winamp, no nostalgia. And I think it was just a tool, right? To play the MP3s. The visualizations were cool, and as Neil said, I mean, you could stare at them for hours, and you could see them in a nightclub in your head. It's they were just so cool, and I remember just zoning out for ages, just listening to music when I should have been going to bed. Like 2 a.m. Oh, let's just listen to one more track, and then you just stare at the visualization. But, and people are going to hate me for this, the reason why I don't think I've got nostalgia for it is because Media Player kind of caught up. I was never into the streaming side from Winamp, like streaming internet radio or anything like that. Media Player added visualizations and added MP3 support, so I just went back to using that because I didn't need another piece of software installed.
It was built in.
Yeah, but in terms of the request that they've put on GitHub and the question of open source, I mean, is this in part open source? I kind of prick my ears up when people say that, because often people sort of beg for things to be made open source. I'm thinking of things in the Amiga community, and it isn't made open source, and they get frustrated. But you kind of have to be careful for what you wish for, because if something goes open source, then that is when you can end up with multiple versions, different versions, no control, and then you sort of splinters off and you don't know which is the latest one to use. And so it's not always a good thing. But to then say, well, it's not open source, but we want you to do some development and then give it to us and we'll potentially sell that, well, that's not on either. So if they've chosen to say it's not open source, then hats off to them, because I understand why, but don't then ask everybody else to do the work for you. Do it yourself.
Yeah, and the point of GitHub is to tackle those problems of having multiple versions out there. Keep it on, do it properly. Keep it on GitHub. Have forks. Have revisions. Have a clear log of changes. That's the whole point of it, isn't it, Dave?
Now, interestingly, I'm reading that their license violates the GitHub terms of service. Now, I'm certainly not going to say who's right here and who's not. But as I understand, GitHub requires you to allow people to fork it. So if you put it in GitHub, people can fork it. That's the rules of GitHub. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if by the time this is broadcast, they've taken it off.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't necessarily, like if you make a picture, the copyright still belongs to you, even if you put it out there. And somebody, it has to, they could do transformative work. There's those arguments.
Yes.
But just because they've put it on GitHub, it doesn't mean they have to comply. It doesn't become open source. It is for GitHub to say you're in violation of our rules, get the hell out of here, or it stays on and it complies with our rules.
It's not clear. I mean, it could be that by putting it on GitHub, they have given people permission to do their own forks of it with the proper attribution and so on. So I'm not clear on that one. But what I think is poetic justice is if they end up losing the rights to the source, if they're ending up, people are able to force it and they decide not to take those random people to court because there's a question of, well, you put it on GitHub and the terms and conditions said people could do this. If they then end up in a position where they don't feel they can enforce the no forking rule, and that ends up with a kind of the Streisand effect where they can't get rid of the source now. So, I don't know, but it looks to me as if Winamp have possibly shot themselves in the foot. They didn't mean to open source it, and they effectively might have done it. So I'm quite quite pleased if that's happened, because I think what they did was cynical, especially when earlier in this year they said they were going to open source it. So we'll see what happens there.
Time now for our community question of the week. Oh, it's good to be back. I always like this part of the show. And last week's question was all about Sega. They posted a job advert, didn't they? And they were looking for someone to oversee their archive of games and the history of the franchises and all of the rest of it, with a particular emphasis on Sega. Now, we wondered, if you were to be a games archivist, which company would it be for, and what series of games would you focus on? So let's get into those. Dave, are we out of contest mode?
Yes, I've slammed the door shut.
Fantastic. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Go on then.
Tungsten Orchid says, LucasArts, Lucasfilm games. I'd focus on the adventure games, as that is the genre that I relate to most. What a fantastic set of games to curate.
It is, and there is a reason why those games are expensive to collect, because they are wonderful games to collect and to curate and enjoy the feelies in and all the rest of it, the code wheels, everything else. I'll do the next one. It's from Fuskit. Says, it wouldn't be a company. I'd focus on a plethora of public domain and homebrew type games that have come out and been given away for free on things like cover discs, Fredfish discs, web FTP sites over the years. These types of things usually get ignored in favor of commercial games. Wibble World Giddy and Alien Fish Finger on the Amiga, Stario on the ST come to mind, as well as Giana's Return on, well, everything. Yeah, that's a nice idea. Archiving the world of public domain discs. You got your work cut out. There's a lot to get through, but that's the point. It'll keep you in a job.
That's true. Yeah. Richard Shears, he's got a very short but succinct answer. Ultimate, play the game.
Yep. Can't argue with that. Quality games.
His job title there could be Night Lore.
Ah, nice. Nice. Yeah. And I must say a big thank you to Richard Shears, because we were talking on Discord, which you can join, by the way, if you want to come and chat all day, every day with us, discord.gg/RMC Retro. And there is a This Week in Retro room. And if you're an official twirler, a Patreon, you get a special color. I mean, come on, guys.
Magenta.
Yeah, so Richard and I were talking about ST Amiga format, the short-lived publication before they broke out into ST and Amiga format as individual publications. Richard was saying he's just missing issue 4. I was saying what issues I'm missing. I said, I've got an issue 4. Do you want me to send it to you? And he said, no, I'll just send you the whole set except for issue 4. So I now have the complete set of ST Amiga format. So thank you so much, Richard. His argument was, I think, that he has digitized it or got hold of the PDFs, and he just wants to enjoy them in that way. Now he's slimming down the collection, I guess, making space, and they will be on the shelves in the cave for people to enjoy. So thank you, Richard. Any other answers stand out there? There's lots of great answers.
Cinemaware.
Yeah, that goes with Ocean. Who said Cinemaware?
Cinemaware was said by Ben Owen Music.
Yeah,
Ben One Music.
Ben One Music, is that what it is?
Yes.
Ben Owen. Ooh, Ben Owen.
B None Music. It could be B None Music.
Ben One. Ben One sounds pretty cool.
Chris, any standout for you?
Somebody's mentioned, I've scrolled quite a way down because I was seeing if anybody had mentioned Micropro. Oh, somebody has mentioned Microprose. Here we go. Midcon 113.
Oh, it's a meaty answer.
Yeah. And yeah, it's quite a meaty answer, but goes into all the stuff I want to get my hands dirty with, trying to get all the manuals together, the maps, all the copy protections, all that kind of stuff. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Colony Activist has a task for me. He says EA Sports because it's in the game. Says Dave has to say it in that voice, so there I did. I haven't heard it for a while, so let me see if I was close to it. He's provided a link. EA Sports, it's in the game. That's better.
That was awful. That was just angry Dave.
But that's what it sounds like.
It does sound like that. Yeah.
Brixton Rifles says the Wipeout series. Always loved that game. Always played them to death. Yeah. So there you go. And that brings us to this week's question of the week.
It's a good one.
So,
what mini console would you like to see next?
No, we've talked about this, Dave. We can't do the same question every week. And that brings us to this week's question of the week, which is, let's go back to our list of gaming innovations. And Dave, console. You do it because I'm losing it.
What is your most important gaming innovation?
There it is.
For you personally. Tell us why.
Yeah. Good.
Nice. Not a list.
Fantastic. As always, head to reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro to take part in the show. If you really like what we do and want to support us, head to patreon.com/This Week in Retro. Don't forget Chris, go and give him a sub at 005 Agama. That's Amiga backwards. Yay. Over on YouTube. Watch his videos. Check out his Zuma yoke video, and soon his trip to all of his childhood video game stores. See if you can help him out with photographs. And I think that covers everything. And of course, thank you as always to Duncan and to you for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.
And remember,
take care.
Remember, no show next week, and we've got 450 subs to go to 10,000. Help us get there.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. He's
Bye.
waving.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RNC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.